Yeah.
If you're signing on a telephone, please make sure your phone is muted. If you don't mute it, I will mute it, and then you'll have to figure out how to unmute it.
All right, it's 5:30. This is Mayor Bob. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, everyone, to the regular meeting of City Council, December 3rd, 2020. Basement of City Hall, American Legion Hall. I'm joined by City Clerk Bessie Jo Wagner. And we have one member of the public from the Library Committee is seated with us, so there are 3 of us here. The rest of the staff and the rest of council members are joining via Teams. Teams is the software that we're using to conduct this. We'll start with a roll.
Yes, Mayor Giles, Councilmember Holmes, did I hear you, Melanie? Councilmember Machesik,
Present.
Councilmember Nielsen,
Yes.
Okay, we've done roll call for 4 people. After roll call, we will do the Pledge of Allegiance. The 4 of us will approve the published agenda, and then we'll do the oath of office, the installation of our newest member to City Council. That will take place next. Bessie Jo will administer the oath of office to Annie. And then there will be 5 of us for the rest of the meeting from that point on. That's how that will flow, if anyone was wondering. Our next step is everyone is up. We'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll lead us in that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Council, we have a published agenda that has been out most of the week. We've had a chance to review. It's council members have the version of the agenda that shows the times, estimated times for each item, each agenda bill item. And it looks like a long evening. We're going to probably be in our seats until 10 p.m. So 2 things I wanted to let you know before we get started. One, Bessie Jo has helped me with the script, and in my script, there are a few breaks that are for 5 minutes that'll help us stay loose and be able to get through our business and to have frequent breaks. I think that'll help. And then the other thing is just if you would help me, staff and council, just to be mindful of the suggested time for each item. I'm sure that some items will take a little more, some a little less, but we could just all work together on that, and we'll have a good chance of completing our mission by 10 p.m. Thank you for your help on that. With that background, would council please make a motion and a second to approve the published agenda?
Bob, it's Mike. Motion to approve the published agenda.
Thank you, Mike. Is there a second?
Second, Colby.
Thank you, Colby. So there is a motion to approve the agenda and a second to approve the published agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the agenda as published is approved. That motion carries. We are now ready to install our newest member of City Council. See, Joe, if you could help the computer so that we can get the camera on the correct spot.
I think, did we miss the consent agenda?
We'll do that after Tammy's installed.
Oh, copy, thanks.
Hey, Bob, it's Mike. For this next item, can we get some clarification on the legal name for Cami? The application was Cami Hedges. The nomination was Cami Callan. The agenda item yesterday showed Cami Callan Hedges. I think it'd be helpful for the public just to know who it is that we're appointing and be clear on that. No, not questioning Cami, but I think we should have clarity.
Yes, she was recently married, so so I think that was part of the confusion. Many people in the community know her as Cami Hedges, but she is now Cami Callan, and so but so by
So let me ask you this, Bessie Joe, what will be on her certificate tonight?
it'll be Cami Callan.
Tammy Callan. That help, Mike?
That helps. So it's Cami Callan, not Cami Hedges as in the application. Yeah, I just think we need to keep everything clear for the general public.
All right, I'm gonna turn it over to you, Bessie Joe. Earlier on the screen, Bessie Joe will get this set up to where
Okay. Hello, Cami.
Hello.
All right. So I need you to raise your right hand and then repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Cami Callan,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Idaho,
and the Constitution of the State of Idaho,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and that I will faithfully discharge
the duties of council member
the duties of council member
of the City of McCall
of the City of McCall
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
all right, thank you, congratulations.
Hold on just 1 second.
We'll turn my microphone. All right. Bessie Joe put me back on live, so congratulations, Tammy. Thank you, Bessie Joe. We are ready now to, the five of us will go to the next agenda item, consent agenda. And the consent agenda, we make a motion to approve and second, and then there is a roll call vote on that motion. Council, are you ready to make a motion, or is there any discussion needed before we?
Yeah, can we pull number 9, AB 20-327 off the consent agenda? Request for approval and publication of rezone ordinance 996.
Okay, item number 9.
Do you want it at the end of the meeting?
Might as well. I don't have any discussion on it. I just,
Okay.
so.
All right. So we need a motion to approve the consent agenda with item number 9, Agenda Bill 20-327, taken off to be discussed at the end of the meeting. Someone make that motion?
I move we approve agenda, consent agenda, removing item number 9, AB 20-327 till the end of the meeting.
Thank you, Colby. Is there a second? Okay, I'm hoping we're not having technical difficulty, but I did not hear anyone second that motion. So talk to me. Are you able to converse with me, or is there a concern about me?
Looks like Melanie is having technical difficulties. She's trying to give a physical signal.
Okay,
Yeah, I just received a text that I can't hear her. She's unmuted, I can see.
Mike, can you hear me okay?
I hear you just fine.
Okay. Tammy, can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
All right.
Would it be
Either-
helpful as, oh, go ahead. Would it be helpful to it'd be helpful to me to understand why Colby wants to pull it. Looks like that was a clerical issue.
Yeah, I voted no on that item. It's just a point of posterity for me, I guess.
Okay, that makes sense. Do we have Melanie back? I'll second it in the absence of Melanie. I think she was wanting to second it, but I understand Colby's point, and so I'll make a second. Mike?
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Colby. A motion has been made and seconded to approve the amended consent agenda. And the amendment is to remove item number 9, Agenda Bill 20-327, and discuss that item at the end of our regular meeting. May I have a roll call vote of all 5 members of council?
Councilmember Nielsen,
Yes.
Councilmember Machezek,
Yes.
Mayor Giles,
Yes.
Councilmember Callan,
Yes.
Councilmember Holmes. We still cannot hear her. She's gonna come right back. She's logged off. She'll be back here in just a minute.
All right, we'll wait a minute. Melanie is trying to log back on, so let's wait a minute to give her a chance to vote and join us, and then we'll move on to our general public comment period. Any verbal or anything like a picture of her thumbs up and text message?
Bessie Joe, this is Erin. I'm working with Mel right now, so stand by.
Can anyone hear me now?
We can hear you.
Yay.
Okay. Thank you.
We were just doing a roll call vote, Melanie, on the consent agenda. It was amended to remove item 9. Perhaps you heard that.
Okay,
What is your vote?
I'm good with that. Yes.
Okay. So council has approved the consent agenda. That motion carries. We are now into the general public comment portion of our meeting. Quick reminder, public comment is only accepted in writing prior to the meeting for the general public comment. This is on items that are not necessarily on the agenda, so it's just general. And that's to ensure that everyone on council receives all comments prior to the meeting. Comments were due today at 3 p.m., December 3rd. No verbal comments will be received during the meeting under the title General Public Comment. Bessie Jill, would you please read into the record? I believe there are 3 public comments.
Yes. Or actually 4. So the first is Wendy Frick at 808 Aspen Alley. She writes, "You are endangering the mental health of our children by denying them the right to engage in sports, band, choir, etc. This is their constitutional right to participate. Tyranny will not be tolerated, and you will have a rise up of parents at your meetings. Think twice, Valley County. You're in for a huge pushback. We are people who have common sense. If we want our kids to recreate, it's our choice, not yours. It's called freedom. Kids are not dying. This is crazy. You should all be ashamed of yourselves. You are killing our kids." The next one is from Stephanie Nines of P.O. Box 1934 in McCall. And she writes, or it's Stephen, sorry, I said Stephen. "The proposed Maverick building with 28 pumps not in the heart of the hall. It has no architectural value. And would be an eyesore in our town. Beginning at Lake Fork, there are 5 other locations where gas can be purchased as well as the existing Maverick. Do we really need a box store gas station? I would urge the P&Z to deny Maverick the privilege of building this unsightly structure." And I have one from Ann Nyes at P.O. Box 1932, states, "Proposed Maverick store gas station in downtown McCall makes no attempt to fit into the city landscape and environment. It appears the company is following the pattern of its buildings in other towns, which are usually located in industrial strips outside city cores or other stations in the city. Do we really need a warehouse structure with 28 pumps? Is this not too much competition for these stations? The design could be improved by adding some wood siding for a pleasing. Let's not let this eyesore mar the main street in our little town. Final comment is from Monica Tway from the Yacht Club. She writes, "Hello, hope today finds you well. I have concerns about the proposed health order draft. I know it hasn't been voted on or finalized, but I wanted to let you know my thoughts. My main concern is no bar top service. I have plexiglass on the bar top, total of 25 plus feet, to keep my bartenders from exposure. The requirement to come out from behind the bar and serve tables puts my staff at more danger for exposure, and going from table to table puts customers at more risk of my bartender cross-contaminating patrons. This is a requirement for bars only when grocery, retail, and most all other businesses help their patrons behind plexiglass, including hospitals and doctors' offices. Another concern is keeping people sat at all times. I can do my best, but not sure how successful we will be. My last concern is my smoking deck. To control people outside will be a challenge. I can close the smoking area, but that will push people out where no one can control anything, and surrounding businesses will be negatively affected. I do believe we need to protect people, but I don't think all situations. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Bessie Jo. Next item is our work session, which will involve a briefing first from, let me get my script out. Okay, work session, Agenda Bill 20-334, COVID-19 update from St. Luke's Hospital Central District Health. This is an action item. Chief Williams will start us out, and then we have two guest speakers that will help us, Dr. Irvin from St. Luke's Hospital and Gina Pennell from Central District Health. Chief Williams.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Justin Williams, Chief of Police. For the last, it seems, 9 months, we've been providing bi-monthly updates for COVID-19 for the city of McCall, specifically for city services and orders and things of that nature. I've been providing the numbers, the statistics, what it is that we're doing, the troubles that we've been facing. In tonight's discussion, we have invited Dr. Gregory Irvin and Gina Pennell. Gina Pennell is with Central District Health. Dr. Irvin is, of course, with St. Luke's McCall. And rather than giving the numbers and giving you my point of view on COVID-19 and where it is that we stand today with the spike in the number of infections that we have, we thought it would be a great idea to have Dr. Irvin come in, provide a refresher to council, and Gina representing Central District Health and the advisory and the draft order that has been published online, which is to be voted on tomorrow by their board. And so with that, Dr. Irvin, if you're on the line, I would like to go ahead and instead of spending my time speaking, I think it would be much better served if you would go ahead and open up this discussion and provide us an overview of your thoughts of where we stand at this point in time and what our expectations can be. So with that, Dr. Gregory Irvin.
Sure. Thanks, Chief Williams. I appreciate it. I'm hoping you can all hear me. We, as everyone knows, are in the midst of a rather pronounced spike in diagnosed cases in the state of Idaho, in the health district of Central District Health, and in McCall. We have seen a steady inflow of positive cases through our St. Luke's Testing Center, as has Cascade Medical Center and Valley County in general. Those cases are confirmed or suspected based on clinical presentation and positive PCR testing through the center. We have been steadily transferring patients from the west central Idaho mountains, which includes surrounding counties in addition to Valley County, to referral centers in the Treasure Valley, in the Boise metropolitan area. We've had a number of cases transferred who have required hospitalization. And our hospitals now in the state of Idaho are severely stressed with admitted patients, with intensive care unit patients, and with a increasing number of deaths in the state of Idaho from COVID-19. We are working day and night to deal with the onslaught of cases. Our medical staffs are extremely stressed by the number of COVID patients we have in our hospitals. We have a lot of healthcare providers in the system, in the St. Luke system, who are themselves ill and are home and on quarantine because of illness. And our main limitations are related to the staff that we have and our ability to respond to patient needs. The system, the St. Luke system, and the St. Alphonsus systems in Boise and the Treasure Valley have put a hold on all elective surgeries and are taking care of essentially the patients with the most urgent needs, including our COVID-19 patients. We are looking at increasing case counts, and since there's a 2-week to 3-week lag between case counts and hospitalizations and new cases and death, we are very concerned that it's going to be a very difficult December and January, and we are urging everyone to redouble their efforts at controlling the spread of the virus by doing the things that we all by now know to do well. We should be masking when in public spaces. We need to be distancing effectively, avoiding large crowds, avoiding indoor spaces with gatherings and get-togethers, and isolating when ill, and getting tested if we develop symptoms of the viral illness. We very much need to work extra hard on controlling the spread of the virus at this point, simply in that we're seeing a huge viral load in the community, both in the state of Idaho in general and in Valley County specifically. So we are urging everyone to take appropriate precautions and to do the things that we know to do to prevent spread. There is hope on the horizon. We are beginning the rollout more than likely this month of 2 vaccines, one from Pfizer and one from Moderna, both of which are RNA vaccines that have proven to be highly effective at reducing disease burden, and based on the phase 3 studies done by both Pfizer and Moderna, appear to be really quite safe. So the safety and effectiveness that we were hoping for looks to be on the horizon. It is going to take some time for this to roll out. It will be well into the spring before we are able to get vaccine into the community to the point where we will see the herd immunity that we need. We need 75% of patients, of people in the country vaccinated in order to get herd immunity. If we do that, the virus will have no place to reproduce, and it will die away and we'll get back to our lives. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel, but we're going through a very dangerous period now before the vaccine is rolled out, and we need to be very, very careful and cognizant of the need to reduce spread of the virus, including masking, distancing, avoiding large gatherings, especially indoors, and again, all the things that we know to do. So I'm available to answer questions from the City Council regarding those facts and what we're seeing here in the community with COVID-19.
Thank you, Dr. Irvin. We will do that right now. I'm going to poll council, all 5 members. We'll start with Mike. Questions for Dr. Irvin?
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Greg. Yeah, one question while we have you. I don't know if we're gonna have other opportunities to ask you questions, but with Central District Health looking at putting their order in place tomorrow, what's your feeling on our position? Do you advise us to see what happens tomorrow and then consider what we want to do from there, or give us your read on that if you don't mind?
Sure. Jean is on the line, and she can round out what we know about what's going to happen with Central District Health tomorrow. But we are presuming that there is an order coming down to provide increased safety and restriction in terms of reducing spread in our health district, specifically involving all 4 counties in our health district. Heretofore, Ada County and Valley County have been the 2 counties that, for example, had a mask mandate, and they're looking at including all 4 counties in the health district because of the disease burden that we're seeing. I would urge the City Council to continue your good work at promoting anything possible to reduce spread in McCall specifically and in Valley County in general, including a potential redundant mask mandate. We know that masks are very effective at reducing the spread. They're not perfect, but they do reduce spread of virus. There's a very interesting study that is very telling that was done in the state of Kansas this past summer. In Kansas, a statewide mask mandate was ordered by the governor, but the legislature chose to allow individual counties to opt out of the mask mandate, and a number of counties in Kansas did. A study was done looking at what effect that had, and the counties that opted out in the following 8 to 12 weeks saw a 100% increase in the number of diagnosed COVID-19 cases. The counties in Kansas that maintained their mask mandate saw a 6% decrease in the incidence of COVID-19. And that's very compelling evidence that not only does masking work, but mask mandates work, and help give businesses and the people of the community the cover and protection that they need to reduce spread. So I would urge the council to at least consider a redundant mask mandate for the city of McCall. It's something that we definitely want to maintain here in McCall and in Valley County in general.
Thank you, Dr. Urban. So Mike, good question. Our process tonight will be initial questions for Dr. Irvin, and we're going to hear from Gina Pinnell and initial questions for her, and then we'll make another sweep through the council. Just general questions like now you've heard from both guest speakers, and we can ask them some more follow-up questions, either one of them on their opinion on whether the city should do more beyond what the draft order and the final order that we're expecting over the weekend. So that's a good question. This is just our first sweep. I'm going to move on to Melanie. Questions for Dr. Irvin?
No, I think I'm good right now. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Melanie. Cammie, you're next up. Questions for Dr. Irvin?
I don't have any questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Colby?
None for me. Thank you for being here and being available to answer our questions and inform us.
Thanks, Colby. Dr. Irvin, my question got answered Mike asked the same one I was thinking about, and we'll probably revisit that once we hear from Central District Health. So if you could stay on a little longer, we'd appreciate it. Thank you so much.
I'll stay on as long as you need me.
Thank you, Dr. Urban. All right, Justin, we're ready for you to introduce Gina then.
Okay. Thanks, Greg. Appreciate you being here tonight and the support that you've always given us. Next up for the discussion is Gina Pinnell with Central District Health. Gina will talk to us about the reasonings behind the vote on the draft order that has been publicized and put forth. And as a city, we are currently working the Emergency Operations Center and COVID-19 group that is headed by myself met today, and we have already come up with policies and protocols for the city to adapt according to this order should it be finalized and voted on tomorrow and implemented. And the date of implementation for this is not on Friday. The date that will go into effect is Sunday, December 6th. And so it will not go into effect immediately on Friday. So with that, Gina, if you would, Gina Pinnell with Central District Health.
Thank you, Chief Williams and Mayor Giles and the City Council. Can you all hear me?
We can, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for the opportunity. So I want to talk a little bit about what, just kind of reiterating some of the things that our epidemiologist had said to our board of health, which met on Tuesday, and really looking at the risk of exposure and the burden of disease. And it's the highest it's been since the onset of the pandemic. And that's true for all of our counties. And we look at the case rates, we look at hospitalizations, we look at a number of things, including our ability to identify and reach out to individuals who are infectious, and we can quarantine their close contacts. And at this point in time, that is certainly not happening. We do not have the bandwidth to keep up with this type of number. We can do that at about 500 to 600 cases per week, and we're around 3,000 cases per week. So that's just not something that we're able to do. And those are two of the things that it can effectively manage an infectious disease, when you can isolate the infected case and then quarantine their close contacts. And then the third step in that is the consistent practice of mitigation measures. And so that is where the public health order is coming into place. It was advisory in nature at first, and just not seeing the trends that we need to see in the right direction, knowing the holiday was just around the corner and we have a couple upcoming holidays. We just share the concern from Dr. Urban that the rest of this month in January and possibly, hopefully not, are going to be a little bit rough, or a lot rough for individuals who are out in the community. And when we talk about exposure, that's when you're outside of your own household, when you're out in the community, when you are engaging in those activities in social and not social distancing. And those high risk activities are when a mask cannot be worn and social distancing isn't practiced. So in our order, you will see, implications for bars because you take your mask down to drink and socialize. For restaurants, you can't eat without taking your mask down. Sports, youth activities, that's not taken lightly. We understand the importance and the mental health and positive overall positive experience that brings to youth and families, et cetera, but you can't play basketball and football without a mask. So when we look at those high areas and risks of exposure, those are the ones that we are looking at to help reduce, and including the gathering sizes of 10. And so I think a couple things that I want to mention is there's a lot of conversation about the role that youth play in transmission, and due to the higher level of asymptomatic spread that they have, they don't tend to exhibit symptoms as much as adults do, and because of that, we're never going to be able to draw a clear line of transmission between the students or youth, not students necessarily, but youth and the community. But we certainly know it's happening, honestly, because of that reason, because they can be taking it home to their families or grandparents and just not know it. And so that is a concern for us. We've promoted schools being open. It's a safe place. We know that education is critically important. Your superintendent up there has done an incredible job, but we also are aware that there is some contribution to community numbers. We can't put our finger on it, and I'm not sure that we will ever be able to at this point. Looking at needing systematic and surveillance testing that's every day, every person, and that's just not where we're at in our country and our state and our counties. So I think the order itself is in draft form at this point. It will get a vote tomorrow. I think we're we're pretty confident that it will get approved. You know, it's hard to say what will happen, but it's in draft form. It won't go in effect until Sunday because of there may be some tweaks or some modifications that are made to the order before it goes into effect at midnight, technically, or 12 a.m. on Sunday morning. So I think I'll stop there and then pause for any questions for the council.
Thank you, Gina. We'll make a quick sweep through with council, and then, as I said earlier, we'll probably have some more questions for both of you. So please join us through the conclusion of this agenda bill. All right, let's start with Mike. Question for Gina Pinnell.
Thanks for being here, and I don't have any questions. I think you've answered all of them. I think we have a good handle, and for yours and Greg's time, it's much appreciated.
Thank you, Mike. Melanie, you're next.
Gina, thank you for being here. I do not have any questions at this moment. Thank you, though.
Thanks, Melanie. Tammy?
I don't have any questions. Thank you for informing us, though. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tammy. Colby?
Yeah, thank you for being here, Gina. I don't have any questions right now. I'm sure I'll have some questions when we discuss further, though. Thanks.
Thanks, Colby. So, Gina, I have one question. It has to do with the curbside recommendation. Let me see if I can find it. It's let's see.
Bob, I believe you're probably looking for the retail section where it says that curbside or delivery when possible.
Yeah, can you help me find the number and the letter for that?
Yes, sir. Give me one moment. That is number 5. Businesses.
I think it is item number 5. Businesses must implement delivery curbside services when possible. Can you talk to us, Gina, about how you would interpret it today, that current language? And the reason we're really interested in this is we have some stores where the 2 examples that I gave to council and I've talked about before are ski shops, sporting goods stores where perhaps people need to go indoors to try on a ski boot or a boot fitting. That's one example. Jewelry store, other clothing stores. Tell us about the flexibility that they might be able to use and still meet the spirit and intent of this order.
Sure, absolutely. That's a great question. So I think the intent of that is looking really at restaurants and not necessarily retail industry. I will double check the order itself, but we're looking at places where, again, the mask has to be removed and you have to engage, you know, in eating and drinking, et cetera, without that particular mask. But when we're looking at retail, those things can be staggered. They can have appointment times. They can just limit capacity to allow for that physical distancing and the masking. You know, you don't have to take your mask off to try your boots on necessarily, but the intent of that piece is for you know, not in order to only do curbside, because for some people it might be better beneficially and financially and economically for them to fully implement curbside service if they're a restaurant per se, because it doesn't make sense for them to only have 2 tables. They would get more business doing the ability to just do curbside and put all of their resources into that. So the intent behind that particular portion is for those restaurants where someone would come and normally sit down and eat, is for if they have the ability and would like to choose to do curbside, it's going to be the safest. The next safest is to physically distance those particular tables and ask that patrons mask until they're eating or drinking and then mask up when they're done. And some don't want to manage that piece in between and just will move to curbside pickup and or delivery so that they don't have to deal with the enforcement piece within their own business.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you for explaining that. Really appreciate it. Gina, we wanted the city and the council wanted to thank you for giving us we had an advanced copy, a draft. All of us have that in our hands or on our computer, and we've had a chance to review it before the meeting. So that was a huge advantage for us. I wanted to thank Aaron in Strategic Communications for getting the word out to our businesses. And I believe there's a formal way for people, they could comment by 5:15 or 5:30 tonight, somewhere in there. I'm hoping that any comments that you receive from us might be passed along to the full board of Central District Health Board on Friday, if that's possible and meets your process. Thank you. I see you nodding your head, so thank you for hearing our concerns and questions. And I think in general, we're pretty comfortable with it. Let's make another sweep. This may not be the last one, but let's make another sweep through council. And the two items that I see in our agenda bill, our direction, our recommended action is a direction given to staff, our city staff, regarding the preparation of any city public health orders. So as council member Mike Machezik mentioned when he led off, the question for Dr. Irvin is like, do you think we need to do more than what's in the Central District Health Order? So that's one question I would like to hear each member of council provide their thoughts. And perhaps they'll have some more questions from you, Gina, and from Dr. Irvin. And then from there, and the order of this doesn't really matter, but the second item I'd like to have council weigh in on and provide feedback is, do we have any tweaks that we're aware of that we would like to make a suggestion on the draft order? So let's start with those two items, and we'll make one sweep to get started on that, and we may make another sweep. So, Mike,
Mr. Mayor.
would you lead?
Mr. Mayor, this is Justin. If I may make a point of clarification, we may have Bill Nichols weigh in on this. This was part of the discussion. If we create a health order to mimic, to go along with, to strengthen Central District's order, as a city, we cannot implement something that's less restrictive. I do not believe. I believe we can be more restrictive than what the state is, but not less. And so with the order that's coming in from Central District Health, it is a misdemeanor offense. And so I believe we would need to be very careful of what we do. I do not know for sure if we would be able to implement anything that we do like we have done previously. We were on the front side of the curve with the mask mandate, and so we made it a civil fine. However, if there's already something in the state that supersedes that, I do not believe that we will be able to make it a civil fine. It would have to stay with the misdemeanor and what Central District Health says. So we would need to be more restrictive, not less restrictive, if that's clear.
Yes, it was also, that was mentioned very clearly in the draft order.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we were aware of that for this topic of discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, we are tracking that. Thanks for clarifying that.
Yes, sir.
All right, where were we? Was I calling on Mike?
I guess you're calling on me. So I do not have any other questions or thoughts to add to the mix.
Thank you, Mike. Let me ask you a direct question, just and we can change our mind as we go. This is the deliberative process. So do you feel comfortable with if the ordinance comes out and goes into effect Sunday night, you feel comfortable with that? Or do you think that the city of McCall needs to ratchet it up, needs to do something stronger, as Chief Williams talked about? That's the only decision space we have, is either go with the Central District Health Order, the final one, or do we want to do something stronger? What's your thoughts on that?
I believe we should be following Central District Health.
Okay. And then the second question is,
I don't know that we need something more stringent. I'm not hearing that from either the experts or our community to do something stronger than Central District Health. So I think falling in line with what Central District Health is doing, is important. If for some reason their health order does not pass, then I think we need to have another discussion and put that on as an agenda item for the city to address that. That would be it.
Thank you, Mike. That's pretty clear. Do you have any minor tweaking that you would like Gina to consider, take back to her, to Central District Health, based on your read of the draft that we received today?
I do not.
Thank you, Mike. Melanie, your thoughts? Same question.
Well, I pretty much agree with everything that Mike just said. I think that we should support Central District Health and make sure that our messaging is in support of what they may come out with tomorrow. I don't know that redundancy is necessary. But again, you know, if they don't pass this, I agree with Mike that we need to have another conversation.
Thank you, Melanie. Tammy, what are your thoughts?
I didn't get it till late this afternoon, but just reading over it, I think it's good. I would agree with a lot of it. I don't know about going stronger than what they're proposing. So that's my opinion on that.
Thank you, Cammy. Colby?
Yeah, I'm probably in line with everyone else here. You know, with not having the ability to have a lesser infraction on these, I don't see why we would, you know, I don't see the need to do anything more stringent than what this calls for. I guess the one question is what do you think the duration of this would be if it passes, Gina?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you. We would likely see the order in place until we see consistent trends in the right direction. And what does trend mean? I would say, I'm going to just throw a number out there, 3 to 4 weeks of moving in the downward trend. Again, I'm throwing a number out there. What will likely happen is with any of our public health orders is we have like a gating criteria, you have expectations as far as case numbers and hospital capacity that we need to meet to be able to relieve the order or make the order no longer effective. So those would be is probably a discussion our board will have tomorrow. And it may also include what is the criteria for a stronger order. Will it get to a point where more restrictions need to be in place, and what is the criteria for that to happen? So I'm going to throw a number out there that it needs to have a consistent trend, and we look at data in a period of a week at a time and 2 weeks at best because of the way the virus works. And so when it can't just be a 2-week trend of a decline, because that's actually Valley County saw that recently and then quickly went back up. And with our case numbers so high, and I neglected to mention, we don't have an accurate case count, total case count per week like we have been able to do. And I use, for example, the school categories. I looked on Monday and we use a case rate of a certain number per 100,000. And on Monday, the case rate was 28.22, which was put you guys in yellow. And then just today it was 38.86, which puts you at red. So you went from red to yellow to red in 3 days. And that's not because of anything different. That's because it took us that long to get the number of cases logged through our system, et cetera. So I would say at least a month is probably a safe bet. But again, all bets are off with COVID, it seems these days, but we are going to look for that consistent trend in a decrease. And I would say a month is probably a good place to start, to give you just a general number if I had to.
Great, I appreciate it. That's helpful. And then the one other question I had, I guess, maybe to pose the concern that we heard from a local bar owner here regarding the bar top service. Maybe could you delve into that one a little bit for why that comes in there? You know, I think her concern sounded to be that there seemed to be ample protection for bartenders, but if they leave their box, then they're more likely to get infected.
Sure. Yeah, it's a very valid concern. I think the intent of when I look at the order, the intent is to not allow individuals from different households to congregate at the bar because that actually puts them at risk. Even though there's a barrier in place, a plexiglass, COVID is airborne. So unless that plexiglass goes from the bar top and is sealed and all the way to the ceiling, even then, I'm not sure that that's going to offer the 100% protection. What we're asking is that the bar tops are not allowed for patrons to sit at. So I think using the intent of the language, that the individual who expressed that concern can probably find a way around that. If that means having individuals still come up and get their drinks, I feel like some type of flow in the business sense could happen. But we are just asking that individuals not of the same household unmask and be in close proximity. And so I think that's more of what we're looking at, not to put her staff members more at risk. So I think we've worked with them in the past, and they've been great in following protocols and doing a good job. So I think there would be a way around it to still have them comply and not allow patrons to sit at the bar top.
Great, I appreciate that explanation. I think that's all I have, I guess, for the questions you asked, Mayor. Yeah, I don't feel it's necessary for us to do anything more restrictive or stringent than what Central District Health proposes. And I also agree with Mike and Melanie regarding further discussion if the order doesn't pass tomorrow.
Thank you, Colby. I don't have anything further to add. Thanks, Gina and Dr. Irvin, for answering all our questions. Let me try to summarize, and then I will, before we leave this item, I will poll the council one more time. So the recommended action in our agenda bill is to provide direction to staff regarding preparation of any city public health orders. And I think what we have consensus on at this point in council is we will follow and support the direction that comes out of Central District Health. We have all reviewed the draft and feel comfortable with that direction, and we'll support that. And we anticipate that at Friday's meeting, there'll be a few tweaks and perhaps some changes, and we will have a copy of that over the weekend, and that goes into effect Sunday at midnight. So if for some reason the vote turned out not to implement any direction, then the council would reconvene and use this draft to come up with some specific stuff for the city to pursue, specific ordinances. But we don't anticipate that happening. Feel confident that Central District Health, the board, will provide some guidance there. So is that, let me ask council, just let me ask all of you at once, are you comfortable with that direction?
This is Mike, yes.
Mike says yes. Melanie?
That's a yes for me as well.
Tammy?
Yes.
Colby?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me just ask Annette, city manager, sometimes I think I'm being pretty clear and I'm not. So does that work for you? Are we pretty clear on that? What our direction is?
Yes, sir. I've got it. Before you leave this item, I'm wondering if you want to hear from Erin on the business feedback she received. At the last meeting, you had asked us to engage with the business community with a heads up, so to speak, about the Central District Health Order potentially coming, and she did that. And so I don't know if the council's interested in hearing real quick what she heard back about that before you wrap up.
We would be very interested. Thank you for that reminder. I forgot that, Annette. Thank you very much. So, Erin, share with us what you have heard from the business community.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. Erin Greaves, Communications Manager. At your last meeting, you asked just to make sure that we were checking back in with our businesses through all this. And I reminded you that we have been sending out correspondence to all of our business owners as CDH has released all of their advisories, whether they're orders or just advisories. In the last one that I sent, I also included a form and gave businesses an opportunity to give us some feedback, such as changes to their businesses or platform that they've been running, as well as any ways that the city of McCall can help support them as a business. I received several phone calls. I received some emails. A lot of people filled out the form. And in general, what the consensus was is a lot of compliance. I mean, already in place. People expected it. I got a few phone calls. One of them, obviously, from Monica from the Yacht Club. We talked through some things, and some other local retail establishments with some specific questions. But in general, everyone seems to understand the where and the why and the how. The one thing I am hearing is they would like to see some more masks, if we can help the businesses with masks. And so today, I've worked with our EOC team and Chris Malvich, our PPE, our logistics coordinator for our PPE, and we're going to go ahead and order some more masks so that we can help and support our businesses with that endeavor. But we'll continue to keep the open lines of communication. We sent out another message today, which I believe you all saw, letting them know that they did have an opportunity to provide feedback to Central District Health for their board meeting tomorrow. And so I know some of them have already contacted me that they've sent forwarding comments to them. So that's kind of where we are right now. We're going to keep the open lines of communication and, you know, continue to let them know that we're here for them and do whatever we can to keep the community solid. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Erin. That's really encouraging. It's very encouraging that, you know, we're on the right path and that there's generally acceptance and that they have an opportunity to be heard if they have specific comments. Council, any questions for Erin? Mike, I'll start with you.
No questions, but thank you. And I appreciate all of your efforts to reach out to people and make sure that we're all working together as a team. And you do a great job with that.
Thank you.
I agree, Erin. Melanie?
No questions, but thanks for all your good work, Erin.
Tammy?
No questions.
Colby?
None for me. Thanks for the hard work, Erin.
Thanks for your good work on this issue, Erin. And Annette, thanks for reminding me that we had made that assignment. Always good to hear what results of our surveys and outreach. So with that, I want to thank Erin, Annette, Gina, thank you for joining us tonight, and Dr. Irvin, and good luck on to Central District Health. We hope that that process goes really well for you tomorrow. As you always do, keep us posted, and we look forward to implementing the direction.
Thank you very much. I'll do that.
Thanks,
Be well.
All right.
Mayor Giles?
Yes.
Hello? Yeah, Greg Irvin. Yeah, I just want to say something real quick. And that is, I really want to call out the fact that we are so fortunate that we live in McCall, that we live and work in Valley County, and that we are part of Central District Health. Many of the other health districts in the state are having a great deal more trouble with compliance and mandates and enlightened leadership. And our Central District Health Board has done an incredible job of making the safety of the residents of this health district their priority, and really looking at the science and looking at what needs to be done to keep people safe. And we are so fortunate to be part of that. I am extremely grateful for that. We have an incredible health board here in the 4-county Central District Health. So that's just a call out to that.
I agree with you. Thank you, Dr. Irvin. When Erin sent out the information to us today with the draft order, she also sent us other information, and I had a chance to listen in to the link, which was about an hour meeting Tuesday night, I believe, Gina, December 2nd. So I got to listen to the entire meeting, and it was very impressive to see how the board operates. The folks are, all the counties were involved. Elmore County, Ada County, Boise County, and Valley County. Really good questions were asked. And that very issue that you raised, Dr. Irvin, about other health districts, I believe it was Ms. Laciando from Ada County, I believe she's a county commissioner, raised that question about perhaps other health districts will be more motivated as a result of the positive things that are being done with Central District Health. And when I listened to that, Gina, I was hoping the same thing, that some of that will spread. So I think Dr. Irvin's right on. You could pass along our observations, if you would, to the board. All right, with that, we will move on to our next topic. Thank you all. Second part of our work session is Agenda Bill 20-331. This is a presentation and discussion of the Parks Facility relocation financing options. It is an action item. Annette is going to start us out, and we'll hear from Kurt Wolf from Parks and Rec, and from Linda. She will introduce Anderson and talk about different options for financing a relocation.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. As you'll recall, we did discuss at length at a special work session on October 30th, I believe, with the joint meeting with the library board about the next steps related to the library project. And one of those key elements related to that project is the relocation of the parks maintenance facility from the annex building next door to the library. And over multiple configurations of the city council over the years, that site has been defined as being needed for the library expansion footprint in the future. And that's still the case now. And so at the end of that work session, you asked staff to go back and see what we could figure out in terms of how to finance a relocation of that facility without having it be a part of a bond measure in the future related to the library expansion. And so we've done that work. And before we get into the financial details, I thought it might be good, especially now that we have a new counselor with us tonight. Welcome, Cami. Kurt just briefly describe for you what the proposed project is that was previously approved by the council for the parks to move, and a highlight of what the costs are related to that. And so in your packet were the conceptual drawings of the new site over at the Central Idaho Historic Museum, and I believe we included a copy of the proposed budget from back when we did the May bond measure for the library expansion project, so you have something to refer to there. So we'll have Kurt just sort of set the stage here with what it is we're talking about regarding moving the parks facility. And then Christian with Zion's Bank has a PowerPoint that I believe was forwarded to you earlier this week to walk through the actual financial mechanisms available to the council. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kurt.
All right, thank you, Annette. Good evening, council. Kurt Wolf, Parks and Recreation Director. I will share my screen and try and include the the same packet that you guys have in your packets. Can you guys see my screen now, and can you hear me okay?
Yes, Kurt, coming through fine on the screen and we can hear you well.
Okay, so I'll try and make this quick out of respect for your time and a long agenda tonight, and open it up for any questions you all may have. I know most of you are very familiar with this, with the exception of Cami, and welcome to the team, Cami. So a few years back, I was tasked with kind of researching and assessing different locations to relocate the shop. We looked at facilities that would house us as well as public works. We looked at a lot of different sites, both city owned and lease or purchase options. And it boiled down to this site, the museum site. And so what you're seeing in front of you, North State Street, so the hospital is down here to the west where my cursor's at. And then the Forest Service and their construction laydown yard is to the east on the other side of the property. The numbered building footprints on this are the existing museum associated buildings and those tied to the historic site in general. And so what we've looked at is based on meetings with the State Lands Board, the Historic Preservation Committee, SHPO, this kind of southeast corner made the most sense to preserve the historic character of the site and how it flows, and to kind of tell that story of past, present, and future. And so we're looking at this as currently just a timbered site, so we will lose some trees. And what we're looking at is, access off of Forest Street from the south, and that would be our primary maintenance access with employee and public parking in this area. And then we kind of make improvements to the existing Foresters Walk, realign that walk, and parkify this space in conjunction with the project. So overall, that's what we're looking at. As this has taken shape, as we've looked at including it in the bond measure or not including it, and how do we fund it if we don't, we've gone through a few different rounds to try and shave costs off of this thing. We can eliminate the material storage bins. How much do we have to pave now, and what could be paved later? The building was trimmed back to kind of meet the current demand of our department, not necessarily account for future demand. So what you're seeing here would, for the most part, replace our current shop with a more efficient building. And keep in mind that this is a very simple metal, bare bones building with office space, break room space, and then obviously shop space. This, basically from this line to the south, were 2 additional bays. Those are easy costs to shave off now, but you're only looking at, $25,000 per day, so to speak. To add those on in the future, comes at a much higher cost, probably triple that, if not quadruple that. But it is an option, and that's what we have looked at that. So that's where we're at. That's an introduction to the site. Again, a few years back, we looked at a number of other sites, both city-owned, lease options or rent options in some of the industrial areas, or purchasing property somewhere else. We already own this property. It does have deed restrictions from the state. We've gone through those motions with the state, and it's I think it would breathe life into this site. It's fairly underutilized right now, and it is a really neat site to have us out there. It's centrally located, and happy to answer any questions as it relates to that.
Thank you, Kurt, for that quick introduction. We've seen these handouts before, and thanks for putting that together again. And as you said, Tammy has not seen this yet, so we'll work with her to get her up to speed. Let me ask for quick questions of Kurt. Mike?
I don't have any questions of Kurt. I think I got a pretty good handle on it.
Thank you, Mike. Melanie?
Same here. No questions. Thank you.
Tammy?
Can you hear me now? Sorry about that.
Yes.
My only question is, so you said to add on the extra that, it's about 25,000 would be the difference?
So right now, this building, again, it's a prefabricated metal structure. This, if we are kind of tasked with shaving off upfront costs, just with a big project, a library project, a bond measure, each bay, if it were to come with the building and be installed, right now, when the overall building's going in, is estimated at approximately $25,000 a bay. This is an expandable end section on this thing. So you can, there's basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bays. And so if you narrow that down to 3, you'd have an expandable end section. And so you're cutting off roughly 50,000 now, but to come back in, 5 years from now, you got to remobilize, you got to, it comes to add those bays isn't going to cost 50,000, so to speak. It's going to cost quite a bit more than that. We don't know the exact number, but so you save money now, but you spend that money at an inflated cost later to add them. So there's value in having them now. We definitely could use the space, but we also could make do with, the current square footage we have in a more efficient layout. So it's just an exercise we've gone through, and I wanted to bring it up just so that we are looking at where can we trim costs down on this. And on that same note, there's a significant amount of site work in here, and the original estimates, it's a pretty big price tag. I think in talking with some local contractors, I think there's an opportunity to piggyback off of some other city capital projects where we'll have suitable fill, where we could do this site work for pennies versus dollars, but it's going to take some additional coordination and logistical juggling to make that happen. So we are looking at other areas that we can trim cost. We've had conversations with the company that manufactures these buildings. They've got a very strong reputation for donations, especially for municipal projects and trade type work. So we're looking at that. We don't have numbers to that yet, just because we're still dialing in the project. So does that answer your question?
Yes, that does. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Thanks, Tammy. Colby, you're next.
Yeah, hey, Kurt. I think you might know the question I will be asking, because I've asked it a few times, and I'm still trying to figure out if we can ever have this actual meaningful conversation with the council about another site location in conjunction with Public Works. I mean, as you know, they're wanting to build a new shop as well. It seems like we have 2 departments that need a shop that, potentially could be in a different location, and add the ability for Public Works to phase out of its current location, which really is, I think, has higher and better uses than a Public Works facility in that location. I'm kind of curious why we wouldn't be able to put this in a different location, namely the land that we purchased, the couple acres down there at Riverfront Park.
So, I mean, I think depending on the time frame of the library, and that's been a big driver in this. Riverfront Park has 0 infrastructure down there, and this is a lot more feasible project to implement as far as a time frame goes. I wouldn't say I'm opposed to that at all. I'd love to see something happening down there at Riverfront. It'd be nice to have a master plan, but all of that takes time. And with this library project kind of in full swing, it's juggling, all those pieces to try and make the best decision moving forward. So, I don't deny that a shared space would be great if we have the time and we can make that happen. I also see a lot of value in this site. And there's definitely not enough room to combine both, or this isn't the ideal location for both uses, especially public works with their equipment. But this is a site that we currently maintain. I think there'd be value in us being there as far as breathing life into it. It's centrally located. It's a lot easier for us to mob out of and maintain our facilities in the heart of the city. So I think it could go either way if we have the time. It's something we could definitely look at. We've already invested a fair amount of money into these plans, into the site planning, and making it happen. So no, I hear you, and we can continue that conversation. I think the clock around the library project is going to be one of our biggest drivers as far as my experience on all this goes.
And Mayor, if I could jump in for a quick second. One of the other considerations too that goes along with the timing issue and just making sure we're all on the same page with the council and your priorities is that it will be substantially more expensive to do that out at Riverfront Park and move 2 departments to a location that has no infrastructure. So we'd have to put in all the sewer, we'd have to put in all the water, the electric, everything. And we just honestly don't have that kind of money. And so we will never get the library done if that's still the council's priority. In a timely fashion, if we need to wait until we can figure out a way to finance a consolidation of public works and parks out at Riverfront Park, because the library can't expand under the current proposals without parks moving. So again, it kind of goes back to what does the council want to do? Do you want to see through the library expansion as you've previously expressed? If so, then this is our best short range solution that works for everybody and that we possibly can afford to do after you hear the presentation from Zion's and Linda. Or everything's going to have to go on pause while we spend a few years figuring out the game plan to consolidate these 2 departments and how we're going to finance it, which is a much bigger price tag.
So, I mean, we're already poised to build a new maintenance facility at the Public Works.
No, not really. We haven't actually funded that. There's no, I mean, you guys got the recommendation from the engineering and the group about what should happen at that site if they're going to fully utilize that site, but the only money that we've identified to spend at Public Works is to fix the HVAC system, which is the immediate life, health, safety problem with the mechanic shop and the diesel exhaust, but there's been no other money appropriated or identified to do any other work at that site right now. All we have is the plan that you receive that says if that's going to happen at that site, here's what they would recommend, how we phase it, but we have not funded it.
So Annette, this is Bob. What I remember is the council gave you and the staff direction to present the material tonight as you stated. And while we were not unanimous on our direction, you have stated it correctly. The council is interested in coming up with some ideas to see if they're doable to implement on the SITPA site, as Kurt has described. So I'd like us to continue on with our agenda on that and hear from our other speakers.
So I just have to say one more thing, Mayor, that I suppose we build a maintenance facility, not move the whole Public Works department in that direction immediately. I think that's something that where both departments have a need for a maintenance facility, that maybe they could work together to achieve something that both needs and may still be able to achieve expedience in keeping the library project moving forward as well. This is not the first time I brought it up. It's been a couple of years, and so it is a little bit frustrating to not have any actual like real discussion on this. But we'll keep moving on. That's all I do.
Keep moving on, Bob.
Let's proceed.
Okay, so if you don't have any other questions for Kurt, then I think I'll have Linda introduce Christian from Zion's Bank to talk to you about what the available options are to finance this project if it's not going to be a part of a bond measure. I think Linda's on.
I was muted. I apologize. Okay, so good evening, Mayor Giles and members of the council. Christian Anderson, who's Vice President with Zion's Bank, is here again tonight to talk to you about some potential outside funding sources for the parks relocation. Christian has been before you a couple of different times talking about bonding and other items, and so he has a PowerPoint to share with you and go through his suggestion for some potential funding to move the Parks Department. And I think Christian is on the line.
I am.
I can't see him, but he's there. Okay.
I'm here. Yep.
Take it away,
Thank
Christian.
you, Linda.
You're welcome.
All right, let me just bring these slides up here real quick. All right, are those visible then?
Yes.
Yeah, I can see him.
Perfect. All right, Mayor and Council, I've put together just a couple options here. Given, I'll talk through a few things where interest rates are. Also, just a quick comparison of this to the general obligation bond, since that is recent, kind of fresh on everyone's minds with the past election, and then answer any questions that you have. So first. Come on. There we go. Just want to give the council an idea of where interest rates are. Of course, we talked about this months ago with the election that was had, and at that time rates were very low. Rates have since gone even lower. You can see kind of the bottom here. This is a 20-year horizon of the bond buyer index. Again, this is an index of 20-year municipal bonds of varying types and ratings, just to give you a snapshot of what direction interest rates are going in the municipal market. We bottomed out late in the summer, have come up a little bit since then, and then after the election, rates started to trend down a little bit. At this point, I think the major market mover is likely to be positive vaccine news, which we have had some already. I think as that continues, as plans and distribution schedules and things for that become more clear, I would expect to see the market start to return more toward normal levels, and that seems to be the case, or at least the assumption of some others as well. We often rely on forecasts from J.P. Morgan, who have analysts who do that for a full-time job. Make those forecasts. And just this last week, for the first time in months, they started to forecast some material increases. That being said, even with the forecasts, the increases that they're forecasting for the next year, even if those all come to fruition, those rates would still be well below historic averages. Still on the lower end of this chart. So I would say, anything done in the next year is still going to likely take advantage of historically low rates, even if they're not the lowest of the low that we've seen in the last few months. Just a quick overview. I think it'd be helpful to kind of use the general obligation bond as an anchor here to then provide the distinction between that and this appropriation lease structure. The first thing to understand is that really anything that the city wants to do to finance a project, with a third party, with the market, with a bank that is not the general obligation bond for this particular type of project is going to more or less be some form of an annual appropriation lease. Annual appropriation meaning the lease has to be appropriated by the council each year, or that is, the council has the option to reappropriate the lease payment each year, but it does have to be an option of the council to choose not to make that appropriation. And that's the key feature of it. So general obligation bonds by statute have a term limit of 30 years, whereas these leases do not have any defined term limit. That being said, there are practical limits. The useful life of a facility is probably the first one, but also, depending on which route you want to do the financing, if you're looking to work with just a single bank as the lender on that, they're likely going to be limiting you to 10 to 15 years, maybe 20 in certain circumstances. Whereas if you went out to the bond market, we could access 30 years. As far as a vote, general obligation requires the 2/3 supermajority vote. The appropriation lease does not require a vote, just a vote of the city council to enter into it. And the reason for that, I'll discuss this a little more on the next slide, but it is because the obligation is for 1 year and for only 1 year. And then the council can vote whether to take on another 1-year obligation each time. And in that way, under the Constitution, it is not considered a debt, and therefore does not require a vote. For purposes, for the general obligation bond, it's any capital projects defined in the ballot. On these leases, it's certain capital projects. We can go into the details on why a little more if the council is interested. But primarily, this works best for new construction projects where you're building something different, or you're building something the city didn't have before. So for example, if the city were to purchase an existing building and then completely change and retrofit it, this would work fine for that. Whereas to say, hey, we want to make some renovations to the existing city hall because that are just overdue, that's harder to do given the legal structure here. So newer construction projects are great, and we feel like the project that's been proposed here would fit in just fine. As for the security, on the general obligation bond, it is an unlimited tax levy. It is a general obligation of the city. So it's kind of at the top tier of the city's obligations. And the bond authorization provides the city with the ability to raise taxes to make those payments. On the appropriation lease side, there's no additional revenue raising authority. The city has to find the capacity within its existing budget resources to make the payments. And then the security is the lease payments themselves if they're appropriated. So if typically we would define what we call lawful funds, which is identifying the revenues and the reserves of the city that legally would be available to make a lease payment if the city council voted to make the appropriation. So we would typically, probably for this type of project, we would define lawful funds as all general fund revenues that are not otherwise restricted to other purposes, unrestricted general fund reserves, and then probably your local option tax would be that lawful funds. But again, it's only securing the lease if the council makes the appropriation in a given year, and that pledge only lasts for that year for which the appropriation has been made. On top of that, the lender or the investors also have the leasehold, which will make a little more sense here in a future slide. As far as the source of repayment, on the lease side, it's that lawful funds. It's whatever you define it to be as what you're going to use to pay that payment. And then on capacity, whereas on the bond side, there's a legal limit to how much you can ask voters for. On this side, it's really just dictated by the market because, again, it is not a debt under the Constitution. It's more of a question of, what can you afford? So really, this is taking kind of a similar structure to if the city were to lease to own police vehicles or a snowplow truck or something like that, on an annual basis, that then once you've paid it off, you own it. It's kind of converting that structure into a structure that fits the requirements of the Constitution, complies with the Constitution, that allows you to do real property instead of just equipment. So the constitutional background here, I mentioned this a little bit, but the Constitution requires a vote for indebtedness unless it meets one of two qualifications. One is ordinary and necessary. A lot of cities use this for water and sewer projects, deem them ordinary, go to a judge, judge will deem it ordinary necessary, is the hope anyway, and then the city has the authority to go into debt for that project. This type of project is very unlikely. I won't speak for your attorney, but I would say very unlikely to qualify as ordinary necessary. So instead, we target this. This structure targets the other provision, which is an obligation of less than a year, is not considered a debt under the Idaho Constitution. This was tested in the Supreme Court of the state of Idaho in 2015. The case was Greater Boise Auditorium District v. Frazier. The Auditorium District collects a tax on all room sales, motel and hotel sales in the Boise area. And so they already had the revenue to do their project, which was the expansion of the Boise Center. But they did not have the authority to enter into a debt to finance that expansion, despite already having the money to do it. And so they came up with, well, didn't come up with this structure, it already existed. And frankly, cities and counties in the past had gone to a judge and a judicial confirmation to have these projects judicially confirmed as obligations of less than 1 year. They said they wanted to do the same thing, and they were willing to appeal it to the Supreme Court to hopefully make it so this you wouldn't have to get a judicial confirmation every time. And that's what happened. So they appealed it all the way to the Supreme Court and won in a 5-0 decision. And the court found that that these appropriation leases, if properly structured, are not considered a debt. So what does that mean, properly structured? The basics here, it has to truly be year to year, meaning the city has no obligation to affirmatively renew the lease. It cannot be an automatic renewal. These structures are actually very common in other states. Most states have some form of this. And in a lot of them, you can set it up for automatic renewal, and it's only non-renewed if the city council specifically comes out and says, hey, we don't want to renew it. Here, it has to be the opposite. The council has to take an affirmative action specifically. It cannot be an automatic renewal. It cannot be just snuck into the budget. They have to vote on this specific item. Are we going to renew? Are we not going to renew? It has to be truly 1 year at a time. That also means that there cannot be long-term obligations like insurance. You cannot require the city to prepay 5 years of insurance. You cannot require the city to fund a reserve that is forfeited in the event of non-appropriation. It is truly a year-to-year obligation. From the city's viewpoint, it's really no different than if someone already had built this site and said, hey, why don't we lease it to you? And you'll lease it on an annual basis. The big benefit here, of course, is that it's your project. You get to decide, you're going to build it to your specifications. And then at the end of the lease term, the leases terminate, and then you own the property. As for the termination, the city has the option to walk away without penalty. Now, without penalty does not necessarily mean without consequence. And what I mean by that is that if the city were to walk away from an annual appropriation lease obligation, it's reasonable to assume that it would be quite a few years before a bank or investors would trust the city to enter into another annual appropriation lease. So the expectation going into this is that while the city does not legally have to renew, the expectation is that you will, because you need this project to begin with. It's an essential use of the city. You wouldn't be doing it if you didn't actually need it. As for what happens in the event of non-renewal, this is where that leasehold comes in that I mentioned as part of the security. So mechanically, what happens is, let's say you did this with a bank. The city, which owns the land, would lease the land to the bank for the term of the lease. So let's say that's 10 years. Leased to the bank for 10 years, which the city has the authority to do with property that it owns, along with the improvements that are going to be constructed. The city is designated, or the trustee designates the bank, excuse me, I have kids yelling in the background. The bank designates the city as its agent to construct the project. So it's your project, your specifications. The bank does not control what you're going to build, and then leases it back to you on an annual basis. Now, all this actually happens simultaneously. The day you enter into this lease agreement, you lease it to the bank, and the bank leases it back at the same time. That lease back to the city is for 1 year at a time. For each year that the city continues to reappropriate and make its lease payments, you continue to have use and enjoyment of the facility that you've constructed. However, if in any given year the city votes not to appropriate the lease, the bank has the option to force the city to vacate the property at the end of the current lease term. Under normal circumstances, the trustee would then attempt to release the facility to a private company, to the Department of Lands, to whoever, to try and recover their investment. Now that's a little more complex in this case because of the deed restriction, and I'll talk about that a little more on the next slide. But that's what they would normally try to do. But throughout that time, the city still owns the land. You own the project. You have title to all of it, fee simple. You've simply granted a leasehold on the property to the bank. And so either once the bank, at the earlier of the bank recovering its investment and being repaid, whether that's because you made all the payments or you non-appropriated and they were able to successfully lease it to someone else, or frankly, that ground lease, that primary lease expires, which has, it can actually extend up to a certain period of time by statute, up to 99 years, but that would be defined in the documents. Once that expires or it's paid off, the leases are all unraveled and the property reverts back to the city. So you own it under every circumstance and you always will get it back, even if you non-appropriate. It just may take a few decades in kind of a worst case scenario, but it's still yours. You never lose the equity essentially that you're building into it by paying those lease payments. So for this one specifically, given the small size, I think we're talking about $1 million project. Our recommendation would be to just plan to do this with a bank. And we would do that through a competitive bid process, doing a request for bids to solicit those bids from those banks. Term of 10 years or less, and I've provided, I have some numbers here for you on the next page with 8 years, which is meant to line up with your local option authorization that you have right now. And then as far as that lawful funds designation, we would take a kind of a broad approach that I already mentioned. General fund reserves, and local option would all be encompassed in there. You could pay it from any one of those, but that would be kind of the pledge. Once appropriated, that's what's available. The larger we can make that lawful funds designation, the better terms you would see from those banks. The biggest roadblock that we have to this is that deed restriction. And it comes back to the prior slide about in the event of a non-appropriation, the bank has the option to force the city to vacate the property. Normally, they would try and release it. Of course, they cannot release it to another property if it doesn't fall within the deed restriction waiver granted by the Department of Land. So that being said, there are some banks that may be comfortable with the financing even without the waiver, and they would simply have the understanding that if the city were to non-appropriate, the worst they can do is force the city to vacate the property until the end of, until they're paid back eventually or the lease expires. Or that the only person they could release it to is the city itself, or maybe the Department of Lands. We have seen this before. We've had both cases where legally they could not re-let the property to anyone except the issuer due to security issues like for jail financings, but also for practical reasons or PR reasons that it just wouldn't make sense for the bank to force the kids out of the classroom kind of a thing that we've seen in other cases. So I think it's still possible. We would certainly have to fully disclose the deed restrictions in that request for bid process, make sure that nobody comes into a bid not understanding that concept. Another idea that we had would be to approach the Department of Lands just to see if maybe there is a short list of permitted uses that they'd be willing to grant an additional waiver on, things that are not going to have any kind of negative impact to the site, uses that fit very well within the way that the building is set up, use as like a shop or things like that. So a private company that is really using it for the same purpose. But if they're not able to grant that or not willing, I think we would still be fine. And frankly, this is all hypothetical, as again, the expectation is the city would make the lease payments because you need the facility and you need to use the facility. with that, here are some simple scenarios I put together. As for assumptions, I have two versions here. One assumes that we are financing the cost of issuance. The other assumes that we're not. These do have relatively high issuance costs just because of the complex legal structure. Certainly there's more legal costs than if you were issuing a similar size general obligation to a bank. So what I've included here is, your municipal advisor, Zions, bond counsel, title costs, potentially a bank fee if the bank had a fee, or their own legal costs. Conservatively at $65,000. I have confirmed with bond counsel that this is pretty conservative. It should be quite a bit less than that. Current interest rates plus 0.5%, just because we are looking forward quite a bit of time. And then it's about a 7-year term with a final maturity in 2028, which is when your local option expires. So here I've provided a bit of a range. If we finance the issuance costs, the estimated range on the interest rate, now this is interest rate incorporates some of these costs, 2.13 to 2.63%. That annual payment working out to $166,000 to $169,000. That's not a very wide range. It's just because it's a fairly small financing. That variation in the rate doesn't have that big of an impact. And then as far as not financing the issuance costs, it does bring the payments down. $155,000 to $159,000 is the current estimate. But that would require the city, of course, to pay those issuance costs from other funds at closing. So just a question of whether they would be wrapped in or not. As for the alternative to a annual appropriation lease structure is what we call a tax anticipation note. This would be more of the let's pay for it in one go option, or I guess more aptly 2 goes. The idea here is that the project is too large for the city to comfortably cover in just 1 year. But perhaps if it could be spread over 2 years, it would be more palatable. So the idea here is that the city would fund a portion of the project right up front with existing revenues, existing reserves, and then issue a tax anticipation note to cover the balance. Now, the tax anticipation note also is not considered a debt under the Constitution because it is for 1 year or less. So it's literally just a 12-month or 11-month obligation. So with that, we would also solicit bids from banks, and then you would decide which revenues are going to be pledged for that, and it'd probably be the same. It would be a general obligation of the city, but just for that 1 year. Benefits of this is, the interest rate would certainly be quite a bit lower because it's just 1 year. And there's no risk of non-appropriation because it's literally just 1 year. And also the issuance costs should be substantially less. So that is my presentation. I'll answer any questions that the council may have.
Christian, thank you. That's really encouraging. That's really good news. So just a procedural question, Linda, is there any more stuff that we're going to talk about? Or is this the time? Let me ask you and Annette, is this all the information we're going to get? And so we can start talking about financing options, because our recommended action is to provide direction to you on what our preference is for a financing option.
Mayor Giles, no, it is not. We also looked at some funding sources that we might be able to utilize in-house to pay it ourselves without outside financing, potentially saving the issuance costs. But also those same funding sources would be a source of repaying outside funding, outside financing. So yes, there are a couple other things that we need to look at. We have to discuss with you tonight.
Who will be leading us through that?
I will begin it, and Annette will add where she thinks she needs to. And yes, so whenever you are finished with asking Christian his questions, then I will be happy to lead you through our discussion of what we found internally.
So I think because we are pretty much behind on schedule, I was going to try to be a little more efficient and see if you and Annette could give us highlights on that. and also your perspective on, I mean, it sounded very encouraging what Christian presented. So let's hear a short review of what you and Annette have found internally. And then I think council could ask some questions of both Christian and you, Linda.
Okay, that will work just fine. So internally, we looked at our revenue sources and tried to determine what was, a good funding source to try to fund internally the move of the Parks Department. The first one we looked at was utilizing LOT funds. And so I went back in time and looked at how much the city has gotten overall across all funds and departments for LOT. And it was an average, or it has been an average of, oh shoot, just a second. Playing with my screens here. It was an average of about 345,000 that we've received, the city has received from LOT funds over the last 4 years, including this year of what has been allocated for fiscal 21 for the city. Of those funds, the council has committed to funding the LOT lot administrator salary and wages, and then also the winter snow sidewalk removal. And moving parks is an allowable use under the ordinance for LOT, so that would not be an issue there. And so twofold, we were looking at LOT as a potential source to repay any outside financing, but the council could also choose to dedicate funding for a year or two to pay that in-house. The downside is it would probably take the majority of the amounts. In over 2 years, it might. So we would have to see what the final costs were to see how that would pencil out, I think is what I'm trying to say. Our average collection over the last 3 or 4 years has been about 654,000 total for local option taxes. So it is something that we could explore a little bit further to see how we may utilize those funds. So given that, the amount that we've taken in the past and what we've committed already, even if we, with inflation, we had to increase the LOT administration dollars and the winter sidewalk removal, we could probably comfortably fund the parks relocation $170,000 a year, and then leave the remainder, which is estimated to be about 310,000, to go to outside funding and nonprofits. So that's one thing that we were looking at. It's not a bigger take than what we have currently been getting out of LOT. The other option we looked at was fund balance. Our fund balance, every year we accrue excess fund balance that we use for capital projects and improvements, since they are one-time revenue source. It varies from 1.1 million to 1.5 million in excess fund balance. And by excess fund balance, I mean those are the amounts that are available to spend. So our fund balance policy requires a minimum fund balance in all of our funds, not just the general fund. And the excess is calculated by taking our total fund balance in the general fund, taking less any restricted funds, and then any reserves. And so we have cash reserves for budget stabilization and for cash flow. And we also have a reserve commitment for housing, which is, I think it's 5%, but I might not be correct in the percentage that gets pulled off the top. And fund balance could also be, so we could pull monies out of fund balance. I know, Bob, you were on the council at the time. I don't think anybody else was, but we did dip into our fund balance reserves to fund the land acquisition for the airport. And that is allowable under our current fund balance policy, but if you choose to do so, then there needs to be a plan to repay it within 3 years. The other option we could, so there is a property tax, it's an annual property tax that we take off the top from our tax levy that we have, if you will, put a fence around for capital improvement and capital projects. And the current balance is of that, the current amount is $457,000. So you could make a decision to allocate 100% of that over the next 2 years for the parks relocation. And that also could be a repayment source for any outside funding. I think those are the 2 or 3 options that we found at the staff level, and I am available to Annette. If she has more to add, we can answer some questions if you have any.
Before we go to questions, so that's a lot of stuff.
I know.
I mean, we have lots of questions, and we're not experts like you, but it's really encouraging to hear that we have lots of options. So you mentioned LOT 170,000. That happens to be the same number that Christian talked about under one high scenario, where we fold all the closing costs in it.
Yes, and that is why I use that number.
And it's
because
8
that
years.
was the higher option.
7 or 8 years. So I'm assuming we would use both those strategies. If, in other words, your contractor needs to be paid when they finish the work. So we would do some option like Christian talked to us about, and we could fund it as one example out of the LOT 170,000. Is that what you were thinking, or was there some other?
Not 100%. So that would be, we could do a loan, and you could use that same 170,000 to repay outside funding, and you could also then use LOT funds, but 170,000 isn't. So that would be used if there was a TAN. So say you committed to 300 and some odd $1,000. So we could get creative with how we might fund this, but you could commit 300, the entire amount of LOT that the city has been receiving for the next 2 years to LOT, parks relocation.
That was another option. Sounded like you were discussing.
And then you would loan to the Parks Department the remaining amount that is needed, and we would do a TAN so that the tax anticipation note for some amount that is still needed in order to complete the project and have the cash to make it work. So because we would be committing over 2 years, and we would not have the second year's revenue until the end of the construction period.
All right, we're going to go to questions real soon, but Annette, would you use your crystal ball as city manager and tell us what you think makes the most sense? I mean, it sounds like we have some very good options.
Okay, well, before we get to that, I just want to clarify or identify for you that all of these choices come with trade-offs. So these are not funds that are just, sitting there unused right now. So for example, over the last several years where the city has received some of the tourism LOT, and that's one clarification, we're not talking about streets LOT, we're only talking about the tourism portion, but you've funded the library project, you've funded the housing strategy, you've committed to the downtown snow removal, as Linda said. And so if the council did like the idea of using some amount of these tourism LOT as the repayment source for whatever debt we enter into, whether that's with the lease or internal borrowing, whatever, that means we're not going to be able to entertain applications from any city departments for that period of time. We're going to be dedicating that portion strictly to repaying the parks relocation. So the expectation of would have to be communicated by me to the department heads that there's not going to be any applications made by the city for tourism LOT except for hopefully keeping the sidewalk snow removal program in place unless we find, some other mechanism to finance that, which we previously looked at charging a fee, and the council liked the idea of using the LOT because it was tourism mitigation. But anyway, if we do that plus repay the debt for the parks relocation, we won't be able to earmark any tourism LOT for housing or public art or improvements at the golf course or, any of those other things until that debt's paid off. So I just want to make sure that that's clear, that these are questions of that are going to be prioritizations and trade-offs. And then when we talk about, excuse me, the portion of our property tax levy that's dedicated for capital projects right now, again, if we have $400,000+ that goes into the CIP from that portion of the levy, that is currently being utilized to pay for projects. And if the council would like to use that as a source to repay debt for the parks relocation, that means we're not going to have that available for any capital maintenance projects for any other departments for that period of time. So it is definitely going to cause us to delay certain projects in the future by making that choice. So I think the simplest is to do what we can with the tourism LOT, because I think that has always been considered a source of revenue that's not taken, it's an automatic, how do I say this? It's a wonderful benefit that the voters have allowed us to have and isn't intended to be there permanently. And so any of our applications for the use of that money have always been for specific projects that are not considered part of, except for the snow removal, not considered part of our core basic service. So I feel like there's more flexibility in that to make some prioritization choices about what we're going to use that money for, where our basic property tax levy is really to keep the essential function of our services running. And so that would be harder for me to completely eliminate that ability to do any maintenance or repair projects for several years while we repay the parks relocation. So I could see using a portion of that, a portion of the LOT, and then it's just a matter of whether you like the idea of doing this lease financing concept that Christian talked about, which does make the project more expensive by virtue of the issuance costs, or we finance it internally by borrowing from ourselves, from our reserve, which would need to be repaid because we have to keep our reserves to meet our policies. And that's something that our creditors look at and our auditors look at. So eventually everything has to get repaid, right? And it does.
Right. So what do you prefer? Yeah. Let's help guide us on that. You guys are really good at the numbers and the actual cost. The financing cost that we talked about, it's a pretty low percentage rate, but the closing costs, or whatever the appropriate term that Christian talked about, is roughly $65,000, $70,000. So if we did it internally, we'd save on that. We just have to have a way of paying it back. Is that what you would like to do? Would you and Linda prefer that? Or do you feel comfortable using a combination of LOT, say somewhere be around 100,000 of LOT every year for 8 years, and come up with the 70,000 in addition? That would be 170 every year with closing costs folded in. Are you interested in looking at that, or do you want to do it just internally? What's your guidance to it?
Well, I mean, it's how much of a how much we want to bite the bullet in a shorter chunk of time. So if we do the internal borrowing against our own reserve, I believe we need to repay that within 3 years. So that's a bigger impact on what we can grant out through the LOT funds for those 3 years to any particular entity, because we would need most of it. And then it's also a bigger impact on our capital budget if that's the case. But it is cheaper to do it that way. It's just a matter of really tightening our belt for 3 years to make it happen, versus the smaller payments over a longer period of time, which would keep some flexibility in the lot fund for other projects and the capital fund for other maintenance projects. So I guess I'm interested in what the council's, am I getting that right, Linda?
Yeah, no, you are.
Just
that is
interested
totally
in how the
correct.
council feels about, just that shorter period of time, which will cause some short-term pain for other folks that are used to using those funds and just getting it done, versus trying to meet lots of needs over a longer period of time and maybe at a little more expense.
Thank you. You and Linda really, you made that very clear to us. We'll go to the council and see what they think. Thank you for answering those pointed questions. All right. We'll go in the same order. Mike, you're going to lead us off. Questions for either Christian, Linda, or Annette, and your thoughts on what they heard tonight. What direction would you give them? Because our assignment is to give staff give direction to staff on a preferred financing option, and then staff will return to the city council at a future meeting with the action items to implement the chosen option.
Great, thanks, Bob. I think that there are a lot of pieces, parts, options, trade-offs, and some technical items in this discussion, as I think you highlighted. I think to me, it seems like the most benefit would be for staff to kind of whittle it down with our direction to perhaps kind of like 2 options that we could look at. So that I think that for the city council, we are not experts on all of these elements. I think for us to be hashing out every individual piece, part, trade-off, and all that may be inefficient. It seems to me that those that are a bit more of the experts in this arena should put together something that's fairly straightforward. Like, here's one option that would be a shorter term payoff. Here's the trade-offs. Here's another option that would be longer term. Here's where we see the money could come from. Give us something a little more straightforward, because as you know, I would tend to like to hear from the experts that really know their business and know these elements well and can give us something that we can understand and that the general public can understand, kind of more in layperson terms, so that we can understand something fairly straightforward. It's easier to explain, whereas trying to explain to somebody, well, we're doing the tax anticipation note, but we've got this is coming from LOT. That's a lot to try to wrap our arms around. It's a lot for the general public too. So that would be my suggestion, is that we, piece it down to really a shorter term and a longer term scenario that makes sense. And maybe there's a tweak here or there on those, but I think that would be most helpful.
Right. So for example, short term might be 3 years. Long term might be the 7 or 8 year that Christian talked to us about. And within those 2 time periods, those are just to get us thinking. Within those 2 options, we would expect to see Annette and Linda and staff work on, all right, how do we come up with that $170,000 a year, or it's going to be more if it's a shorter term option? What mix of LOT and general funds do we use? Is that kind of on track with what you're looking to see? Something like that?
Yeah, that's what I'm recommending, and I think that would be very helpful.
Thank you, Mike. Melanie, what are your thoughts?
Well, honestly, I don't generally love the idea of too much borrowing, especially with being a municipality. However, I do think there is some benefit in preserving the things that we've instituted over the last few years, and paying a little bit more in order to keep those programs going, whether it be the sidewalks or the different things that we do with lot funds. So I guess my preference would be to see something in that conservative middle ground where we're not taking too much time and we're not borrowing too much money, but we're keeping everything online that we have committed to. Is that
So
fair?
let me pin you down. Is a 3-year middle ground, or do you want to see an option at some other time period?
I like a short period of time, but I think a 3-year is a good, I think that's a fair amount of time
You'd like
to
to see
pay
that
something like this off.
Good. Tammy, what's your thoughts?
So my question would be for Linda is if they were to borrow against the fund balance or the lot funds, would there be any interest that would be earned or that you'd be paying back on those?
Yeah, Annette and I were discussing that. I mean, that's certainly an option. The council could choose to, we could charge interest. I know a number of cities do that when they do internal borrowing within funds. In the past, the city has not done that in my experience here, but that is definitely something that we have been discussing, and then what might be the interest rate that we would establish.
Okay. I also agree with what Mike was saying. If we could narrow it down to just a couple options, there was a lot of information received tonight. I think it would be easier to put it all together if we had just a couple options rather than a lot.
Yeah, there is a lot. Yeah, I think the three of you said it well. And Mike, thanks for starting us out on that, because my head was exploding after hearing all of the good information. That's why we have some smart people that help us. Colby, what are your thoughts on the financing?
I'm not okay with any of it, really. I think that we're passing up the opportunity to make moves for local housing in an area that should not be used for a municipal facility. I think it's a big mistake not to consider it. And you know, we have smart people on our staff that can figure out the best way to pay for this if you guys want to proceed with it. But I don't agree with a move at all. I think we can talk about, like, you know, Kurt's example of, you know, $25,000 a bay, or you could come back and pay $50 or $75 or $100,000 for that bay. But, you know, why would we pass up an opportunity to build a maintenance shop facility that could accommodate both departments as a starting point? And ultimately, the housing issue in this community is not going to go away. In that area where the Public Works Department is an ideal location for the city to be able to come to the plate with local housing opportunities. That's my opinion. So, see.
Well, let me put you on the spot, because it's very possible the council will adopt a financing option at a future date for this site for something around $1 million project. So if that is the way the council heads, and you don't like the options of the 3-year or the 8-year option, what option would you like if we're going to fund that? The staff will do work for us if you lay out an option that you would like to see. It's different than what, yeah.
Yeah, no options for this specific project. I disagree with it.
Okay. All right. Well, Annette and Linda And Christian, I'm comfortable, really comfortable with you bringing us back. I'm sorry we couldn't get you one option, but I think there's some real wisdom in looking at a very short term, lots of pain, 3-year, get it done. And then the, I'll call it the Christian Anderson option, the 7 or 8 year one, where we don't have to go out for a vote. And it's a low interest rate and not as much pain, but the pain spread over a lot of years and it affects our LOT. I think that would be really instructive to us if you could bring the mix of funding for each of those two options that you think is responsible and show us the consequences as you've discussed tonight. Does that help you? Does that be?
Yeah, we can do that. I'm sure the Library Board of Trustees is going to be interested in how soon we can get this back to you, because as you know, there's a memo to you in your packet where they're still advocating for you to consider a May bond election. And that certainly is going to be part of the moving parts related to this discussion again. So just a reminder on that. Although we weren't anticipating you making any kind of decision about that tonight, we really just genuinely wanted to get a feel for your interest in what any of these could produce, and we're happy to bring back more specific choices for you to pick from. So you could consider it, I guess, your first touch on this, and we will come back as soon as we can with the specific laying out some specific choices for you.
Thank you very much. And please note that your briefings were really good. We're aware that there's some very downsides and pain and consequences of doing either a 3-year option, something like that, or an 8-year option. But they also look like they're not pie in the sky. There's things that both of those options look like they're implementable. We could do them. I could see how we could get through that. So thank you for giving us some realistic options. Really appreciate it. Christian, any last comments you'd like to leave with us? We'll
no.
Probably hear. But anything else you'd like to share?
Nope. Thank you.
Oh, it was a great presentation. Thanks a lot. Linda, we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. We'll do your work and because believe me, we couldn't figure it out. That stuff it is very complicated. It affects all the departments and affects a lot of people in our community. So thank you for putting a lot of thought into it. We look forward to seeing that. And that will be, is that the end of December or what do we have a possible?
Well, we can talk about that at the upcoming meeting schedule at the end of tonight. Your December 17th meeting is extremely full already. So I would envision it would be the beginning of January.
Yeah, that's fine. I just couldn't remember. So thank you. All right. So according to my script, we'll close out this item and we're going to take a 5-minute break. We are at 10 minutes to 8 and we had thought we might be starting the public hearings. We have 3 of them. Is that right, Bessie Jo? Thought we'd be starting them at 6:45. So during our 5-minute break, I'm going to ask Annette and Bessie Jo to help me think about if there's any items on the agenda. I don't know if that would be in the public hearing arena or anything after. We could, if we get to 10 o'clock and we're tired, we could delay those to a future meeting. We are in recess for 5 minutes. All right. Yeah. We're just about at 5 minutes. Hi, this is Mayor Bob. We're just coming back from our 5-minute break. And during the break, as your meeting manager, I asked for some input from Bessie Jo Wagner and from Annette to advise me, are there any items that we could delay at a future meeting, because we're almost at 8 o'clock and nearly 2 hours, well, let's see, hour and 15 minutes behind schedule, you might call it. So there were, I think, 2 items, was that right? Or only just 1 item that we are going to take off the table, and that is the evaluation of the city manager. Taking that off the table today, and that will be at our next meeting to get that process going. We have notified Tracy Malvich, and so she knows that's going to happen. Everything else we're going to try to move through effectively, especially these public hearings. There are 3 of them. I'm going to try a new technique that we haven't done much of in this virtual remote kind of environment, and that is when each guest speaker presenter finishes, I'm going to ask the council as a whole any questions. I won't run through the trap line, as I call it. We'll see if that gains us a little bit of efficiency and time on the public hearings. So with that, we will start our first public hearing, Agenda Bill 20-336. It's the request to approve the vacancy, the VAC-20-01 and SUB-20-02. This is Dawson Avenue dedication and First Street vacation and exchange. And this is an agenda item. First thing we'll do is explain the purpose of the hearing. Purpose of this public hearing is to consider a vacation of right-of-way application and subdivision minor plat amendment application to vacate 3 small portions of right-of-way in exchange for Dawson Avenue, currently to be dedicated as a public right-of-way. I hereby declare that we are opening the public hearing, and Morgan will provide comments on the application.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. So, as was just mentioned, this is a vacation of right-of-way application and subdivision minor plat amendment. The plat is on the screen in front of you, hopefully. Hopefully my screen share is working. To vacate okay, great. To vacate 3 small portions of right-of-way in exchange for Dawson Avenue, which is currently privately owned, to be dedicated as public right-of-way. So the 3 sections we are talking about are, if you can see my cursor, hopefully, on the southeast corner, this little rectangle. And then there is this portion, which is, it's shown here as whole, but this portion of fur was vacated several years ago. So it's this half of what used to be fur is what's being proposed to be vacated. So 1, 2, this little square, and then 3 is this small rectangle on Davis, just so you can see those while I move ahead. This may look familiar to you. This has come before you a couple times in the last 2 years, and the city signed an exchange agreement with the property owner a year or so ago to agree to move this forward through the land use application process. So that is what we have before us this evening. So Dawson Avenue, right here down the middle in front of you, was originally platted as a public road many years ago. During the last housing boom, the land was given to a developer of these parcels here on Dawson, where we have all those narrow homes, with the understanding that they would improve Dawson Avenue once the construction was finished and it was fully improved to city standards. They would deed it back to the city. However, during the 2008 recession, the development stalled and the remaining land was sold off, including this road. And so that is how Dawson Avenue was originally public and became private is now owned by somebody privately. And with this being held privately, none of these parcel owners right here currently have legal access to their parcels. So this is something that the city has been wanting to clean up for several years now. And we have finally gotten an agreement with the property owner to give this road back to the city in exchange for those 3 smaller sections of vacated right-of-way, which really just square up their parcel so they don't have oddly shaped property boundaries. So during the regularly scheduled November 3rd meeting, the McCall Area Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously recommended both applications to the McCall City Council for approval. I have not received any public comments in writing. However, when I held the neighborhood meeting for this application in, I think it was October, maybe it was September, we had several members of the public, particularly in this Dawson Avenue, Louisa area, call, email, ask questions, show up in the meeting. And their biggest concern was that this area through here, from Davis across this parcel through what would be the First Street right of way, it connects them to this road and then they can walk to the beach. This is a very heavily used pedestrian area. So the biggest concerns for the public were that a pedestrian access continued to be permitted. They didn't want to lose that when we voided this section of FIR, although this section was really had been used but was not public, but they were concerned about this. So if you look at the plat, over these sections of, well, particularly FIR that we are proposing to vacate, we are maintaining easements for utilities, water, sewer, drainage, stormwater, and recreation, trying to keep some of the value of them having been public right-of-ways in the past there. And so there's a 65-foot wide easement here over the old vacated First Street for those purposes, as well as a 30-foot wide easement here. This one is more narrow because it doesn't need the same, doesn't have the water lines and it doesn't need the drainage and stormwater easement. So it's a bit more narrow. It's primarily for sewer and recreation. And the intent of the recreation easement is just for a pedestrian path to go from Davis down here and through First Street. That's in accordance with our adopted Pathways Master Plan. All of these easements and this final plat have been approved by both city staff and the property owner, so there's no disagreements with that. So I feel like we've addressed all the public concerns that were brought forward in the neighborhood meeting, as well as during the P&Z Commission hearing in November. There was one person who testified that just wanted to make sure that there was going to be a pedestrian easement through there, which there is. The outstanding conditions of approval are prior to recordation, the applicant shall revise the plat as recommended by the Valley County Cadastral Specialist. It was just a really minor like typo, and I actually think that this newest version has taken care of that. 2, prior to recordation of the plat, the applicant shall obtain final engineering approval from the McCall City Engineer. 3, prior to recordation of the plat, the applicant shall receive approval from the Valley County Surveyor. Those are standard. Their signatures are required on the second sheet. 4, prior to recordation of the final plat, the applicant shall submit digital files of the amended plat in accordance with our digital submission standards. 5, the final plat shall be fully executed and recorded prior to issuance of building permits for any of these reconfigured lots. 6, the applicant shall provide the City of McCall with a PDF copy of the recorded plat immediately upon recordation. The city shall prepare all necessary paperwork to execute any deed to transfer title to the vacated street, and approval of both the vacation of right-of-way and subdivision minor plat applications shall be contingent upon the other being approved by the City Council. And I just want to clarify that the city is the applicant, not the property owner. So the city is the one that has been the applicant for all of these applications, and that was part of the exchange agreement that City Council agreed to a year or 2 ago. And signed. So a lot of these things, when it says the applicant shall provide us with a copy, I mean, that's ourselves. So I think that some of these will be pretty easy to take care of.
So Morgan, in my script, it says there's a step where we ask the applicant, so that is us. So that
it is us. You can check to see if the McGregors are on the phone. I sent them the call-in information, but it wasn't clear to me if they wanted to attend or not because they didn't have any concerns or disagreements with any of the easements or anything on the plat, but they might be on the phone.
All right. Can someone help me determine whether the McGregors are on the phone?
And if you or your husband are on the phone and would like to speak, feel free to introduce yourselves now.
I have Drew and somebody else that I don't like.
All right. I'm going to assume, Morgan, that they're not, and you explained that we are the applicant technically.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask council if there are any questions of city staff, and we are the applicant. So any questions for Morgan or anyone else on city staff?
Bob, this is Mike. I just wanted to say, Morgan, thank you for listening to the public comments and incorporating that into what you ended up here with. That recreation easement in particular to many, many people I know was very important. And thank you for good work on that.
Thank you.
I second that one. You beat me to it, Mike.
Well, that wasn't my intent, Colby, but I guess we're on the same page on that one.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it, Morgan. That's I think that's really important that access is maintained. So nice work on that.
Thank you.
All right. Hearing no other questions at this point, I'm going to go to the next step. Written correspondence. I think Morgan said there was none, or is there any written correspondence on this particular hearing that hasn't been presented?
None that I have received, unless some was submitted directly to Bessie Jo.
Okay, Bessie Jo says no. No written comments were received. Public comment. We have the ability tonight on this hearing. It's limited to 3 minutes per person. The time cannot be deferred to another. It's not a question and answer session with the applicant, and the public can state its questions, comments, concerns, and then we'll have a chance to discuss that. So, Bessie Jo, would you assist me in reaching out and asking if there are any public comments on the phone having to do with this public hearing?
Is there anyone on the phone or on the Teams platform that wanted to make comment on this application? I see two callers. One is a 5878 and another caller that is a 1941. If either of you wanted to make comment, would you unmute your phone with a *6. Not hearing it.
All right, hearing none, we'll move on to the next step. No need for rebuttal. We've already asked questions of staff. I think all right, I'm going to ask council. I think we're to the step where I can close the public hearing, but please let me know if you have concerns about that. Anyone have a concern as a member of council?
No, Mike.
Okay, hearing none. As the mayor, then I'll close the public hearing, and no more public testimony will be allowed. So we are ready to deliberate. The council will discuss the evidence that we heard tonight. Either approve or approve with conditions or deny the application. We have a motion in our agenda package.
Bob, I'll make a motion to approve vacation of right-of-way application BAC-20-01 and subdivisions minor plat amendment SUB-20-02 as recommended by the McCall Area Planning and Zoning Commission, and authorize the mayor to sign all documents.
Thank you, Melanie. Is there a second?
Second, Colby.
Thank you, Colby. Okay, since I've been kind of rushing us through this, I want to make sure that we have due process. Is there any discussion or more deliberation needed or desired before I ask for a roll call vote on this motion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to a roll call vote. A motion has been made and seconded to approve the vacation of right-of-way application VAC-20-01 and subdivision minor plat amendment SUB-20-02 as recommended by the McCall Area Planning and Zoning Commission, and authorize the mayor to sign all necessary documents.
Councilmember Holmes.
Yes.
Councilmember Nielsen.
Yes.
Councilmember Callan.
Yes.
Mayor Giles.
Yes.
Councilmember Chesak.
Yes.
Thank you, council. Motion carries, and this request is approved. So the applicant will be happy. That would be the city. Morgan, good job.
Thank you.
All right, we will proceed to our next public hearing. All right, let's see. Is this, yeah, this is Agenda Bill 20-335, the variance, VAR-20-01, variance application for 221 Morgan Drive. It is an action item, and the hearing will begin with the purpose statement. The purpose of this public hearing is to consider the variance application for a specific address, 221 Morgan Drive. The public hearing is hereby open, and Morgan Geestahl will provide comments on the application.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is a variance application, as you mentioned. It is to remove the 20-foot setback from the 100-year floodplain that is identified on the Rivers Crossing plat, as well as to waive the 50-foot setback requirement from the ordinary high water mark and the special flood hazard area of the North Fork of the Payette River, to permit the construction of a new 4,000 square foot residence with an additional 3,600 square feet of patios, as well as a 3,000 square foot shop with 700 square feet of attached accessory dwelling unit and 500 square feet of patios. These two combined structures create a total building and patio footprint on the ground of 11,500 square feet. This development is located primarily within the special flood hazard area of the Payette River and is located, because I should have had a map up so you guys could be seeing that at the same time, and is located entirely with the shoreline and river environ zone. So I do have a site plan up on the screen, so you can hopefully see this. It is a larger lot, just over 5 acres, 5 1/3 acres. Let's see if you can see my cursor. This is the river. Up into this black line, it's considered the floodway. No construction is allowed in the floodway. That's the area where the river channel is, needed or full most of the time. And then this blue area is considered the 1% chance, or floodplain. So the area of special flood hazard is this blue color. So you're probably familiar with our code sections for the flood or for the shoreline and river environ zone, which applies to the lake and the river, that structures are required to be set back 50 feet from the ordinary high water mark. And our code defines that for rivers as the special flood hazard area, or the 1% annual chance flood. So that's the blue area here. So code would require that the structure be set back 50 feet from this blue color. The orange you can sort of disregard. That's the 500-year floodplain, which is not relevant. We don't have a setback for that. So we're looking at the blue. This yellow line here shows the 50-foot setback from the floodplain, and this red area here is what would be left as a buildable footprint if you take into account the side yard setbacks, and then the HOA required 50-foot front setback from Morgan Drive. City code would only require 20 feet of setback here in the front, so half of this. But the neighborhood requires this 50-foot setback on estate lots. So this red area is what's buildable. So I just wanted to show you that. This is the proposed residential structure here. And then this is the proposed accessory garage and ADU on the west side of the lot. So you can be oriented while I proceed. I was just sort of starting to get into the setbacks and talking about 20 feet from the front. The code would also require minimums of 15-foot setback from the side. So that's what this is. It would also require 30% total because the lot width is over 100 feet. So this is more than the 15-foot minimum, but it's adding up to the 30% required by code. The applicant's proposing setbacks of more than 65 feet from the front. You can see that they're set back here, not at the front of the buildable area, but a little further back at 65 feet. More than 15 feet from either side property line, and 480 feet from the river. So they're quite a distance. I think that they're measuring actually to, like what you can see is the river here, not the floodway, which is the area of the primary flood or river channel. And there's no development in here, and that is per FEMA. So in this case, the easterly side property line here, which you can sort of see, it's neither, it's still in the floodway. It's this easterly side property line that they would normally measure setbacks from is not the same location as the edge of the floodway or the high water mark of the river, as it is for a lot of other properties, either around the lake or in different areas of Payette River. So this lot is a little bit unusual in that so much of it is inside of a floodplain. So that is why the applicant's requesting a variance to not only eliminate the 50-foot setback. So if they eliminated the 50-foot setback, it would bring the buildable area from this yellow line over to this blue line here, but to actually build entirely within the special flood hazard area. As I mentioned, it is a larger lot, so they are allowed a little bit more coverage, and they are only at 50% of allowable coverage. So technically, even though they do have a buildable footprint of 11,000 square feet, it could be larger because the lot is quite large, so they're allowed a large lot coverage. The Planning and Zoning Commission has seen this application. They saw it several times. The first time they saw it was during their September 1st meeting. They had a lot of discussion. They held a motion to approve this application. That did not pass. So then they scheduled a site visit for October 2nd, and they tabled the application till October 6th to gather more information. So they had their original public hearing September 1st. They had their site visit October 2nd, and then they had a third hearing on October 6th. During that October 6th meeting, they discussed the site visit, deliberated on the application, and eventually they made a motion to direct staff to prepare draft findings recommending the variance application to City Council for approval. That motion carried with a 5-2 vote, so it was not unanimous. Those findings went before the commission on November 3rd. They were discussed and modified and then eventually approved 5-2 to bring before you tonight. And so that is what you have seen in your packet are the approved findings from P&Z. So per McCall City Code, variances should only be granted if special physical conditions and circumstances applicable to the land, structure, or building involved make literal enforcement of the provisions of this title an undue hardship, and that the special conditions and circumstances are peculiar to this land, structure, or building involved and are not applicable to other land, structures, or buildings in this vicinity. So the applicant has stated that this red area here, it does look rather small because it's on a large lot. It is actually 6,415 square feet. So they have stated that 6,400 square feet is not enough of a building permit, and or I'm sorry, a buildable footprint, and that this is an undue hardship to develop the property as they desire, and that is why they are coming in for a variance. The other issue here is that we do have conflicting code sections. We have our shoreline and river environs code that states you have to be set back 50 feet. So this yellow line, 50 feet from the special flood hazard area of the river here. And then we have a whole floodplain section or flood overlay section of our code in a different chapter that talks about if you're going to build in a floodplain, these are the standards to which your building has to be constructed. So we do have these two contradicting sections. One that says you can build in the floodplain if your building meets these, thresholds. And then we have this other section that says no building in the floodplain. So when this first came to our attention, we discussed it with our attorney, and we have a third code section that talks about when there are conflicts in the code. And so the code states that when there are conflicting sections of the code, you go with the most restrictive. So in this case, the most restrictive would be not building in the floodplain and having to meet that 50-foot setback. And so I just wanted to I know we've brought that before you in the past when we were talking about upcoming code amendments, and that's something we're still looking at. But I just wanted to let you know that, applications are held to the code at the time that they apply. And so at the time that this applicant applied for a land use application, we had this code conflict, and they're held to the more restrictive code, that no development happened in the floodplain. And so that's why they're coming in for a variance. If the council chooses to amend the code in the future to address this and prohibit floodplain development, well, they were still in under this other code with the conflicting section. So I just kind of wanted to explain that as well. Let's see what else. So I want to go back.
Before you end your presentation, could you make sure you cover, I know it's in our packet and we've all read it, but would you highlight the public comments that we've had?
Absolutely.
During planning and zoning was involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sorry. There's just so much information here. This is a really unusual application, and I got a little sidetracked. But what I had started to talk about a few minutes ago is that this red area is 6,400 square feet. And so I just wanted to talk about whether being limited to a buildable area of 6,400 square feet was unique to this parcel or not. This parcel is zoned R8, 5,000 or medium density residential, which has a minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet. So that's actually smaller. So 6,400 square feet is larger than the minimum lot size in the R8. Additionally, most residential lots in the city are zoned R4, which require a minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet. If you take average setback requirements into account for a 10,000 square foot lot, an average R4 lot would have a buildable area of 5,600 square feet, which is still less than the subject property's 6,400 square feet. So I kind of wanted to touch on that just to give you a perspective, because it's kind of hard with this large lot to understand how big this red area really is.
Morgan, does that mean that 6,400 square feet, that's red on our screen, that's outside the floodplain, using layman's terms?
It would be outside the floodplain and meet the 50-foot setback. So if you were to build entirely outside of the floodplain, so in this sort of not highlighted color here, so that would be an option that the council could consider, right? Because so variance code says if there is a hardship, then the code should only be waived to the extent necessary to relieve the hardship. So something that the council could consider is, well, we think that this is an undue hardship, but we still don't want development in the floodplain. And so they could eliminate this 50-foot setback, this yellow line, but still say we don't want development in the floodplain. And then the applicant's buildable footprint would increase from this red 6,400 square foot area back here to this blue line and, the 50-foot depth here, and it would more than double in size. So they could have,
And then the other piece of information I think we learned from you is that our decision space tonight also includes not building in the floodplain and using the most restrictive, since there's a difference of direction.
Yes, so you could approve it with the design as is, which is what was recommended by P&Z. You could also deny it because variance applications are discretionary and they are up to you to decide. It doesn't meet code, and so you could deny it. Or you could also deny this design, deny the variance, but say we would consider approving a variance if, and then give the options for feedback for future applications. We're going to deny this design, but we would consider a variance application if you removed all of the structure from the floodplain. You know, we would consider a variance to remove the 50-foot setback, but we don't want development in the floodplain. So those are all options that the council could discuss at the end if they would like.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Could you then, before we go to the applicant,
No,
and
I still have a little bit more. I'm sorry.
yeah, okay.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to get through a few things, and I know the applicant's representative is here as well. So as I mentioned, the council must determine that a hardship is not due to the actions of the owner. In this case, hardship could be considered due to the design and location on the parcel of the residence and accessory structure. However, the overriding commission decision, the 5-2, 5 of the commissioners determined that they felt that this hardship was due to the FEMA mats taking up so much of the property. So I did want to state what the commission determined right there. And then I can get to the public comment as you requested. I have a whole section in my staff report, pages 2, 3, and 4, talking about the code and variance standards. And so I just gave you a brief summary of that, which is that it has to be unique to this parcel and then only vary to the extent necessary. But there's a lot more specifics on the language of the code on pages 2 through 4 of the staff report. Moving along to public comment, as you asked, the HOA design committee for this neighborhood has approved the design. They have sent 4 letters over the course of the application in support of the design. I will say, though, for the record, that the HOA design criteria or guidelines that they have adopted as an HOA state that structures must be set back 15 feet from the wetlands. And this structure is located in the wetlands. Let me pull up. Oh goodness, this one's kind of zoomed in. This is an exhibit submitted by the applicant. So the yellow color are, there we go, that's a better one. The yellow color here is designated wetland. And so you can see the structure on site. Here, the primary residence, there's a little finger of wetlands here that they're actually proposing to sort of put a little bridge over for their driveway to get to the main house. And this blue area is wetland fill. So they have worked with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and they have obtained a permit to fill this section of wetlands in blue. So I have received 4 letters of support from the HOA Design Review Approval Committee saying that they approve this design and they hope that it pass. But I will say that it doesn't meet the HOA design guidelines of being set back 15 feet from the wetlands. They are filling the wetlands. I've received 1 letter of support from a neighbor. In opposition, I received 2 letters of support. I'm sorry, in opposition, I received 2 letters in opposition for this project prior to the P&Z meeting. And then 1 letter I received was neutral with concerns about building in the floodplain. And as I mentioned, they have worked with the Army Corps of Engineers to make sure that they are going through the wetland filling process and everything adequately. If this were to be approved, they would still need a floodplain permit from the city. And, you know, even FEMA allows and designates the 1% flood area intentionally such that if it was entirely built out, entirely filled in, that the water would only increase 1 foot. So these are all things that have been looked at both with FEMA regulations, would be looked at by the city and then with the Army Corps. And so I did not receive, I received one letter in opposition for the city council meeting. So those were all received prior to P&Z. There was one additional letter submitted by the same individual that submitted one for P&Z, Wes Keller. He submitted a letter for this project to Bessie Joe and myself, and I think that that was submitted directly to you prior to this meeting.
Yes, could you just highlight what the issues were that they raised, the people that were in opposition?
Oh, yes.
Briefly, why did they, why were they in opposition?
Let me pull it up so I can read it. So the letter that I received specifically for the council meeting was from a Wes Keller, a fisheries biologist, and he may or may not be on the phone tonight. I know he was interested in testifying if he could. And his primary concerns were the impacts of developments on riparian and riverine ecosystems, including being close to the water and having fertilizers go in there, as well as removal of riparian vegetation. It's new construction of a very large house, and so they said that rather than allow variances to our existing code, we should require that the applicant redesign the structure around the existing code. And they stated that if you approve this variance, what is to stop additional requests from construction in the floodplain in the future? So it was primarily about the quality of our riparian environment.
Thank you. Were there any others? I believe we found there was another one in our packet. I don't know the origin, the timing, but I believe it was by Janet Lord.
Right, and so that was the one that I said some people were concerned about the impacts of development in the floodplain onto their property, and I just was, that was my precursor to, the Army Corps is looking at this. We will issue a floodplain permit. When FEMA designs these maps, they do so with the intent that this whole area could be filled and that the water would not increase more than a certain height and, not have impacts downstream. So that's something that would be approved during the floodplain permit process.
Thanks for explaining that. So on the screen, I see Mr. Milliman. Steve, are you representing the Sanders, Mr. and Mrs. Sanders?
Yes, I am, Mr. Mayor.
All right. So we have a part of our procedure. We have an item that, for the applicant to present the project. So you've heard our introduction to that. We'll, usually you represent the applicant and engage with us. So would you please respond to what you've heard as far as public comment and process, and then the council will have some questions for you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I appreciate the council and Annette and staff's commitment to continuing to conduct business transparently and under these difficult conditions, as do my clients. They've been working with their development team on this project for more than 2 years, and Jim Frank, one of the members of the development team, had been working with Nathan Stewart throughout that period to assure that the structure met all the requirements of your floodplain overlay regulations. It wasn't until the structure was fully designed that the design professionals and staff realized that we had this issue that is before you tonight. I am very happy to be presenting an application that the Planning and Zoning Commission has recommended that you approve. And they did not do so casually. They had effectively 3 public hearings. The first, as Morgan referenced, with opportunity for public comment. They then decided to have a site visit, which was itself scheduled as a public hearing. They walked the entirety of this property, and then they continued with what was the third public hearing, at which after which they recommended your approval and entered specific findings of fact on each and every variance requirement in your ordinance. So this is not a casual finding by the commission. They worked very hard on this, as did the applicant, and have presented you with a recommendation of approval.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, he's frozen up.
He is frozen.
Steve, I thought you took a pause, but your screen looks like your internet's frozen up.
He'll probably come back.
Are you able to hear me? So Morgan, while we're waiting for Steve Milliman to discuss more with us, I'm looking at my public hearing script, and I just want to make sure that all written correspondence has been read into the record, that we have it on record. And then is there anyone tonight that's trying to provide public comment live during the hearing? Could you help me with that, Bessie Jo?
Yes, I did see that somebody unmuted their phone. So is the phone number 1941 wanting to make comment?
Yes, hi, this is Wes.
Mr. Mayor, this is Bill Nichols. You can't really receive that comment unless Mr. Milliman can hear it. So we need to make sure that he's back in the room virtually before you take any more testimony or comment, please.
Thank you for that advice, Bill. Appreciate you keeping us on track.
It looks like that he signed off, but he'll probably sign back on.
So we will pause here and wait for Steve Milliman to rejoin us and let him finish his presentation. And then if his internet connection is good, we will go to our caller that Bessie Jo identified. I think it's Wes Keller. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Mayor.
Thank you, Wes.
This is Colby and Morgan. Did we do conditions of approval? Did you read through that?
Well, we still have to wait for
We
Steve
can't do
to
any
come
of that.
back.
Okay. Yeah.
When Steve comes back, then she can comment on whether or not he did those conditions of approval.
Commissioners, this is Jim Frank, and he just texted me for a link, so I'm going to send that to him. He should be on momentarily.
Thank you for that update, Jim. Appreciate it.
You bet. Morgan, while he's going through it, I can discuss the wetland delineation work and the core permit if you wanted to pull that up.
Bill, do we need to wait?
I'm part of the team, so. You may be part of the team, but he's the lawyer. Let's wait. Oh, okay. Sounds good.
Hello, can you hear me? This is
We heard you for a minute and then you went away.
Steve. Hello?
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
My system has frozen here, so I'm going to continue by phone if that's acceptable.
Yes, that'll work fine. Thanks for rejoining us.
Yeah, very strange. I was asking Morgan if you could go back to Exhibit A2.3 that you had up that shows the home and the accessory structure.
Okay, Morgan, can you get us there?
The A23?
Right. It's the one you had up just a few minutes ago, Morgan, that shows the blue area and the accessory structure and the home.
Yeah, it's up. I think Morgan's on mute.
Morgan, can you hear us?
Yes, sorry, I was saying it's on the screen. I apologize. I didn't realize I had got muted.
Okay, and you'll have to bear with me and confirm that because I can't see your screen. My system has been shut out of this. So the first point I wanted to make is that there is a reason for the design being planned and shown as it is. A great deal of thought has gone into that. The garage and the accessory structure, which will have a local housing unit as required by your ordinance, is positioned primarily outside of the setback, partially inside. The driveways on both sides then take up some space. The reason the home isn't then immediately adjacent is there is a finger of wetlands which runs between the upland limit of the special flood hazard area and the home. And so by placing the home there, it is not exactly an accurate statement to say the home is placed in the wetlands. The home is placed there because that is a perched area. And there will be a bridge across that finger of wetlands. So that involves the least possible impact on the wetlands, and that's why you don't see the home right up against or close to the garage or closer to the garage. Out of the total 5.2 acres, there is, or 5.3 acres, there is a total impact of 0.15 acres on wetlands. 0.15. So there is nearly no impact on wetlands by placing the home where it has been placed. That is why the Corps issued a nationwide permit, a permit which is issued only when the Corps finds there to be minimal or no environmental impact. I want to be clear about what this variance is about. First, does construction within the special flood hazard area require a variance? The answer